Welcome to NFL Daily, where, like Jayden Daniels, we've shown up to OTAs extra thick. I'm here in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio. My name is Gregg Rosenthal. I'm with Patrick Claybon. What's happening?
It's always the off-season physique updates. That's when you know that it is the off-season, and you're doing review and like going back and forth and like trying to change the opacity on one picture to be like, oh yeah, he does look a little. The frame is more solid now.
It is tricky because, yeah, you could just be wearing a baggy shirt and it could make you look thinner or bigger, like the Luka Doncic shot that I think they had of him in Europe. But in this case, the Jayden Daniels being thicker was supported by the team website. If you're one of the many subscribers on YouTube, you'll see the tweet that went up, and the team is even leaning into it and doing like a spot the difference meme showing SpongeBob here with the big arms, anchor arms. Jayden Daniels does look, looks a little more swole.
Yeah. It's great for the people who are concerned about his frame because I guess I think it's pseudoscience to say the frame correlates to injury concerns.
Yeah.
I think the injury rate in our league is 100%. And you have guys like Carson Wentz or Anthony Richardson who are built like not Calvin Johnson Megatron, but like the cybernetic Megatron. And they still deal with it. Like, it's all luck.
That is absolutely true. And yet, he was just one of the slighter quarterbacks ever. Not that I thought it was going to impact his career necessarily, but it was striking. And even with the bigger arms, he still is going to be slighter. Now, weight, it does matter. I know it's an off-season trope, but like Lamar Jackson, I think he's a reliable source. And he said losing that weight going into last year, after, in his mind, mistakenly bulking up the year before and thinking it affected his speed, he thought dropping the weight would help it. And you could see it. He really was a quicker player last year. I think it helped him a lot.
Yeah, you should play at the weight that you play at. The weight that you've played your best at, and we're talking about 2 Heisman Trophy winners here. You're obviously going to get more weight as you get older. But I think Jayden Daniels was probably right around where he needed to be last year. He's going to get some, but let's not have this guy turn into John Cena or anything.
Or even Patrick Claybon, who is showing up to the studio extra thick as well. I got to say, OTA season, I feel a little more alive. I don't know what it says about me, but
you're in this.
Getting the practice reports and making this show daily, where we're now kind of like updating the news, it is a reminder, Patrick, you gotta love ball, you gotta love the game, and we're not going on the field. This is our game. Do you still have that love of the game, love of the podcasting, love of the broadcasting in you? Yes.
If my Pro Football Reference internet history would be embarrassing to anybody that these are like on off days, just general thoughts. Whenever something comes in, I'm looking to make a case and justify it. So we're in it. So I
think it goes back to how I came up, which was just always reading all the coverage. I've really enjoyed that this week because there's actually been something to read about when I was back at Roto-World, reading everything. And so we got a bunch of just little news items that we'll get you updated with. And then we'll do a little segment too, talking about some veterans who suffered some collateral damage during the draft. Just some veterans that maybe be a little threatened for playing time from rookies. So that'll be our segment. But we'll start with something that actually isn't like a hard news item today necessarily, but we're taping this in the final days before, the weekend. It'll be June. And on June 1st, why is June 1st an important date on the calendar in the NFL, Patrick?
Well, in terms of people's years tolling.
Sure.
Right. June 1st is the year. It essentially, like, it's not the new league year, but a lot of people, that June 1st deadline, it means something contractually.
Like, you can start pushing some money into future years starting on June 1st. So a player like a Jalen Ramsey, who's in a sort of ridiculous situation now, has been literally waiting till June 1st. I have a feeling they have a trade worked out already, and that it's probably been worked out. And just based on the way the Dolphins have talked about Jalen Ramsey, it's clear he was going to be traded. And I have a feeling it won't take long after June 1st. But yes, there can be these cuts that are marked June 1st cuts, but different transactions can happen. You can sign veterans, and that'll count to a different equation. So we might see some veterans pop up and everything. And Jalen Ramsey was on Twitter saying he was grateful for each and every chapter so far, and it was a soft way of saying goodbye to the Miami Dolphins. And I have three teams for you that could potentially get Jalen Ramsey that have been mentioned the most. The Rams are one of them.
Okay, return.
And Sean McVay's been on the record. Certainly, they could use a cornerback. The Cowboys are another. There's been just kind of like whispers of like they have like one more move to make, and there has been some reporting from people in Miami that they were interested in him at the trade deadline even last year. There was like a little whispering about that back then, so that would make you think that they might
famously
be interested.
The Cowboys could have drafted him.
Right,
went with Zeke. That it worked out for everybody, I guess.
And then Jeremy Fowler of ESPN threw out the Commanders, which wouldn't have been the first team I would have thought of, but if he's in like a hybrid safety role, I could see that because they certainly have a decent amount of cornerbacks there, but I think he might be playing safety as next spot. What intrigues you there?
The Arizona Cardinals.
Oh, another one.
I'm going to go off the board.
Okay,
because
it's not an official board.
I think financially they have the space to make it work. They got a great corner out of Michigan. A little late, great value with that pick, but I do think in terms of adding talent to the roster, you could get Jalen Ramsey, and not like a huge cost prohibitive thing that's going to keep you from doing stuff, and maybe be more of a noisemaker in the West this year.
He feels like a guy, a put you over the top, kind of guy at this point of his career. Might change spots. The fact that the Rams and McVay have spoken so openly about it, and it's been reported on, I really think it'll be the Rams and the Cowboys, and I really think it could happen, in the next week, maybe even over the weekend.
What do you think for the price?
Oh, I don't think Jalen Ramsey is going to require much in trade compensation. So, like a 5th round pick.
A 5th round pick.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think the Cardinals could beat that.
Okay. I mean, if they really want him, Jalen Ramsey played solidly last year. I would say he's been a little more up and down the last couple of years, but he's always been great, especially in the first year when he's in a new place and even returning to the Rams. So just something to keep an eye on. And that might not be the only trade that happens with Miami. Right as we were going to tape, our guy, Adam Schefter, not our guy, frankly. We're rap sheet guys. But
yeah,
sometimes Schefter has the news on a late May. He reported that the Dolphins have had trade discussions with the Steelers about their lone Pro Bowl selection last year, Jonnu Smith. I like that he threw in the lone Pro Bowl, which that surprised me. Was he really the original pick? I feel like he probably was.
I mean, late season Jonnu was incredible.
He was, but he probably replaced some people did not want to go to Orlando, and he replaced them. I'm going to guess. I will find that because I don't want to besmirch his name. I've always been a Jonnu Smith fan. He is scheduled to earn $4.8 million this season, and unbeknownst to anyone, he asked for a raise, and the Dolphins basically said, if you really want a new contract, I think it'd make more sense if we found a trade partner for you. Do you like him in Pittsburgh? And does this tell you anything about the Dolphins if this does happen?
No, I have seen Arthur Smith and Jonnu Smith previously in a couple of spots.
Yeah.
The late 2024 Jonnu Smith was intriguing. It was interesting. He was explosive. I loved seeing it. I would hope for the Dolphins and for Jonnu Smith, right, that they could find something north of $4 million that gets him closer to where he should be. Like, we could make it like 9 and then have it drop off in the second year, something, versus another addition to like this wonky Steelers offense that I'm not necessarily interested in.
Right. When I think of Jonnu Smith in Tennessee, especially, I think of a guy who had so much untapped potential that was just a bear to try to tackle, and he's developed into a very good blocker too. And yet, you're right, the actual most exciting version of Jonnu Smith was in Mike McDaniel's offense. And you know who might agree with you?
Who's that?
Jonnu Smith. Smith's preference, per sources, is, according to Schefter, is to stay in Miami.
Area man would like to be compensated relative to his accomplishments.
It's a tricky spot, though, because Miami, by letting this report go out or talking to the Steelers in the first place, are basically saying, we might prefer trading you to actually paying you. And so then it's going to be up to Jonnu Smith. Will he accept a little less money to stay in Miami where he wants to? And, decision.
I mean, hopefully for them, this is a fact-finding mission to determine what the actual price would be. And then to go back to Jonnu and say, well, this is the price. This is how much money we would have allotted for a player worthy of that price. And here we go.
Also, I know he's familiar with Arthur Smith, and they'll love doing 2 tight end sets, and they're going to run the ball and all this stuff. But that's a lot of tight ends over there. Freiermuth, Darnell Washington. They signed Donald Parham.
There's always room for Jonnu Smith in an Arthur Smith offense.
That's fair. And Darnell Washington is about as close to a 6th offensive lineman, although he's pretty good at catching the ball too. But he is, truly a blocking tight end. So that just something to watch. We might have some Dolphins moves. And man, I don't think they're trying to reset. But if they were trying to reset a little bit this year, like trading Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith are the type of moves that you would do. Why create more holes? They already have holes.
But I mean, if this is it, if this is the make or break year for this edition of the why
I don't get
try to get better.
I don't get any of it unless ownership is telling them to cut certain costs.
Hey, make things nice for the next folks who come in here.
You know why I like OTAs in part? Because there's more press conferences. We get to see the people talk. One of those people, our number 4 coach in the entire NFL, according to our draft the other week, is Kevin O'Connell. And he got to talk about J.J. McCarthy, who's back on the field. And he answered a question about how McCarthy looked physically.
Yeah, he's healthy. He's done an unbelievable job. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, just because, and you get so close to this sometimes. I know for me, I've watched, and we've had the benefit of phase 2. Where we were out here kind of throwing and catching and moving guys and kind of building up technique and fundamentals. So you kind of forget the fact that this is really his first runway since the injury happened. And I think it's just a credit to the work he put in.
I think that's a credit to the work he's put in as well. So much that Kevin O'Connell had to remember to talk about it.
Right. Or that even remember that even made progress. To him, that's old news.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this guy's just coming out here working and executing every day. I forgot that this is literally the first time he's done this since everything went horribly wrong for him physically.
I was a guest on the show Purple Daily earlier this offseason. Good team pod. And so I listened to that on the way in, see if we get any J.J. McCarthy talk. Judd Zolgad, the sports dad, was at the practice, and he said McCarthy looked awesome in that practice. That it looked like how he was starting to look towards the end of training camp. He's now the number 1 guy. He's moving around well, and everything that you would want to see, you saw. And then he also noted the opposite was true of Sam Howell, who was his backup. But that it's early. It's OTAs.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder though. You got this kid. Running a 14-win team. He's showing up to Timberwolves games with Justin Jefferson. I'm with it. Was Kirk Cousins doing that?
No. One of the younger quarterbacks that's come in a very long time. He would have been vying for Sam Darnold's records had he been able to play last year. And so he's still young. A lot of promise.
I'm excited about that. I also was interested to hear Tyreek Hill talking this week. He was asked about potentially being a team captain again after what was kind of a rocky end to his 2024 season.
I got to prove myself. This OTAs training camp, I got to prove myself. I got to show up different. The mindset got to be different. So I don't feel like I deserve it. And if I didn't get it, I wouldn't dwell on it. I wouldn't sweat it. You know what I'm saying? Because I put myself in that position. You know what I'm saying?
He's referring to the very end of the season where he kind of took himself out of the game, and also alluded to him just not playing for the Dolphins anymore at that time, which he has said since was an emotional statement, and he's over those emotions, and he has a lot of guaranteed money coming this year, not much after this year. Thoughts on where Tyreek Hill stands? He's not practicing fully, by the way. He's still recovering from that wrist surgery, and so Jalen Waddle's out there as the wide receiver 1.
I think it's a perfect thing to say for the folks who would have taken the end of last year and tried to use that to determine his ability to play football in future years. But I'm not really sure that it matters. Like as long as Tyreek Hill is healthy and running past people, like he's a very good contributor and will be for any team. I need somebody to tell me really I'm 5 years old, what leadership means in some of these circumstances. Yeah, it's better if you show up and you work hard, but a whole lot of people are doing that. So why do we need it from I don't know. Yeah, show up and work hard.
You should ask Bradley Chubb. He said he's seen a growth in leadership over Tyreek Hill. I think he gave some examples, being around every day, leading the young guys, being the vocal leader, finishing first in all the drills, that sort of stuff. The most interesting thing, and one of the reasons I wanted to put that up, though, was that Tyreek Hill said to me, he doesn't think he prepared hard enough for last season, that he was not in the best shape. Which I was like, oh, well, that actually explains why he potentially there were other factors as well, but he literally said he maybe didn't take his preparation for last season as seriously as he has in the past, and it caught him. And so that's something interesting to me, where he's going to be in a contract year this year, and you might see just that little extra burst, which I didn't think. I think it wasn't like otherworldly Tyreek Hill burst last year, and so maybe that comes back.
Yeah, and it could be a great argument to this, like, hey, I'm going to try harder now, and all the things that you thought I was physically declining, maybe you don't think that I will because I'm trying harder, but it's going to be tough.
I believe him. That if he's owning up to that, he kind of came in a little out of shape. There was a little whispers about that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm ready to look at the data and see 2018 Tyreek Hill.
We should check the NGS data on his speed last year, because I bet it still was extraordinarily fast. Yeah. I am ready to debut a true offseason hot take after we listen to Brian Schottenheimer getting jazzed up about CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens' burgeoning bro-ship.
I think, number one, he's doing an incredible job picking up the system. I talked about his intentionality last week, I believe, just how hard he's working, but there was a play. And it really wasn't anything George did. But we're in the red zone, and we're in kind of a spread formation. We hit him for a touchdown. Joe did on a little a bender, like a little skinny post, down in the low red zone. And CD was on the other side. And when CD broke out and he looked back to see where the ball went, and he saw George in the end zone, he kind of dragged his toes up. CD was like, yes. So I think his excitement for knowing that we've added some pieces which will add to the competition, it was cool to see a guy like CD be excited.
You know who's comfortable in front of a room, whether it's a group of NFL players or reporters?
Brian Schottenheimer.
Brian Schottenheimer. My take, and it's been building up here, is Brian Schottenheimer, he's going to be a better head coach than he was a coordinator. If I wanted it to be a real hot take, like he's going to be a much better head coach than a coordinator. I don't know if I really believe it, because I'm basing it on vibes. Okay. And from what I've heard from other players and people that have worked with Brian Schottenheimer, I went back and checked. His dad, Marty Schottenheimer, fantastic head coach. I mean, just look at the wins and losses. I know he didn't get over the hump with the Chargers or the Browns, but just won a lot of games. You know how he was as a coordinator? As a defensive coordinator?
Meh.
Pretty meh. Yeah. Like, his defenses were average. Some guys act, you know how they had the Peter principle? There's the opposite. Some guys are actually built to be the head coach, but not the play caller. I have a feeling that's Brian Schottenheimer.
Yeah, you can bifurcate his focus, but when it's a singular focus on doing one thing, maybe he gets outshone.
Well, maybe he's just not an X's and O's like savant, or maybe he's not special in that way. And that really is important with offensive court. But when it comes to like organization and having details right throughout the building and having relationships and getting everyone, he's good at that. Like, I'm not going to say he's going to be Dan Campbell or anything, but like a very light version of a Dan Campbell or a Pete Carroll, or even maybe like a Mike McCarthy. He left to chew the fat a little bit at the press conferences too. I think Schottenheimer is doing that, but I think he's got like a younger, better vibe to it. I'm in. You
gotta evaluate people. You gotta evaluate coaches. You gotta evaluate coaches' relationships with people, not just on the roster, but in the building.
Right.
And Schottenheimer, you're making me believe.
And he's a Nepo baby, and he's been around the game. He's been in these buildings forever. And maybe that's where his skill set is.
I like his baggage.
Exactly. Like, he knows how an NFL building works. I don't know. That is my hot take.
Yeah.
Today.
No, it's wins of the
I thought you were going to push back on me on this one. A famous Cowboys hater. I think Cowboys fans should take this take and hold on to it tight.
Absolutely, you should hold on to it for dear life, like you should George Pickens.
Especially after we've been killing McCarthy for too long. A couple other just little items of news that we'll fly through here. I thought it was interesting that the Falcons signed a center, Ryan Newsel, who I don't know a lot about, for 2 years and $9.5 million. He was a restricted free agent who essentially hasn't played at all in the last few years because he was Drew Dahlman's backup. He did have a handful of starts, and they signed him to a 2-year contract, which they didn't need to. Big vote of confidence that they've actually found their starter. And if he ends up playing well, that's a nice bit of business. Let Drew Dahlman leave. That's how drafting and developing is supposed to work. It might be a great feather in the cap of the number 9 overall GM in the league, Terry Fontenot.
Many are saying, Greg. Many are saying that Terry Fontenot has a plan and is operating it despite 2 massive albatross quarterback contracts that he's had to deal with during his very short.
Okay, well he signed the Kirk Cousins one, unless you're blaming that on Arthur Blank.
Yeah, I think big free agent quarterback decisions are made by the person who signs the check.
Okay.
That's my controversial.
Although he saved it a little bit with Penix. When I saw that little deal, I was like, oh, that's weird. No one is going to note that, but if he actually ends up starting for them for the next 2 years, that's the exact thing that great organizations do. They develop a guy and then they kind of recognize that they get a year ahead. And that's interesting. The Eagles are a great organization, but one of their moves that did not work out last year was Bryce Huff. He is not at OTAs. That might be an indication that he could be a June 1st cut or trade or not. No. But it's a little similar to James Bradbury last year, was like staying away as they were like trying to figure out a potential future for James Bradbury. So I just thought that was interesting. Then a couple other nuggets. The Packers have offered Jair Alexander a restructured deal, according to Matt Schneiderman of The Athletic. It's unclear if he'll accept it. He hasn't yet, but a source told The Athletic he is planning to come to mandatory minicamp. So even though he's not there now, he actually has been there, I think, a little bit. And that's a sign that something's going to get worked out, I think, here in the long run. Kyle Pitts is recovering from a foot injury. Man, I hate to see Kyle Pitts hurt this time of year already. It was mostly Spencer Rattler at OTAs as the starter that the Saints media watched on Thursday. Apparently, both quarterbacks played very well. Tyler Shuck reportedly.
Apparently, Shuck had some dime.
Yes, Shuck was showing off that arm and reportedly looked good, but Rattler got most of the starting snaps. And then just a little update on the Browns quarterback thing that I mentioned yesterday. I saw on The Athletic that, for what it's worth, the rookies really didn't get a lot of first-team reps between Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders. But for what it's worth, Dylan Gabriel got a handful, and Shadur Sanders was 4th in line. Does that mean anything to you?
No.
He didn't get in.
It doesn't. If Joe Flacco is going to come in there and be at camp, then it's like, okay, well, let's have Joe make some throws to people, get a good evaluation on everybody, and we can deal with the rest of this later.
Also, I would warn people drawing too much from OTAs that the media in most places, really every place, I don't think there's anyone that's like, hey, come more than your mandate, than we have to allow you to. They're only there once a week. And so they're practicing 3 times a week, but the media only sees it once. So Shadur could easily be repping higher in the order on other days, and the media just doesn't see it. But kind of interesting. As was Joe Flacco's comments, I thought, where they asked him for the millionth time whether he's going to be like a mentor to these guys. Did you see that one?
Joe Flacco's been answering the mentor question now for the better half of it.
And he's come up with finally the perfect answer, which was there is no way
to practice.
There's no way to answer that, because if I say that I'm going to mentor him, then I'm actually selling myself short, and I'm not really competing when they brought me in here to compete and play. Like, they want me to play. And if I say, I won't mentor him, then I'm just
there is a way to answer it.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to play, but I'm not going to be a bad teammate. I'm going to help people when they make a mistake that's there, but I'm not holding anybody's hand.
Yeah, and he did
reading them books before bed.
He basically did say that and said that the young guys have asked him some question, and that's been a fun room, that Shadur's had them laughing a lot, that they're all getting along in Cleveland. Let's take a quick break, and let's talk about some veterans that are under a little bit of fire after that. Back on NFL Daily. It's the time of year where people are like, don't read in too much to who's playing like which spot or whatever. I'll read into what I want to. I can suss out what matters.
Context is important.
I'm not 4% more concerned that both practices that the Patriots media has watched Drake Mays struggled at. It's like a little concerned.
4%?
4% concerned. I
So
don't
you're
even know.
96% not concerned?
Yeah. About it. Just like a little bit. So when the draft happens, we talk all about how these new players are going to fit into their new spot, and we don't really talk about the veterans who are affected. So I just thought, kind of looking through the rosters, Patrick, that we look at some guys that maybe suffered some collateral damage in the draft who are facing a little heat this summer. The competition starts a little bit in OTAs, certainly. You get an idea of like how the team is maybe going to work the snaps in training camp. It really gets going in training camp. And so we're going to we'll throw back and forth a handful of veterans that we think are interesting, that are under some fire in terms of playing time from rookies. Why don't you get us going?
Yeah, I'll get started with a guy who's going to be a free agent in 2026, and that's Odafe Oweh, who finally was able to get a whole lot of playing time last year, able to get into 15 games. It's got 23 career sacks, got 10 sacks last year. But Mike Green coming on, and the veterans and the way that this Zach Orr defense operates, I think there's going to be reduced snap count for him that may kind of hinder his ability to get a long-term contract going.
That's an interesting call, and he's an interesting player who, whenever
he's
you
like
bring
the number
up
one traits guy,
traits versus production. Yeah. When Shamar Stewart, the pass rusher who was taken by the Bengals, got taken 17th overall, he had a somewhat similar profile to Oweh, where he just hadn't produced much in college. As a Ravens guy, I'd be curious to wonder how like Ravens fans think about Oweh, because to my eye, I was like, he was a guy that was supposed to take a little bit to develop, and that it seems like that's what's happened, and he's turned into a solid player.
Yeah,
what do you think?
It's solid, but still to the point where they are taking Mike Green right in these positions, and the skill set, right? The explosion, like everything's there from Oweh. It's obvious when he's got that opportunity, but you would like him to be perhaps a more consistent producer, and they're still taking shots to find that guy. And I think not just from the pick, but for his personal sake, in terms of getting on the field enough to make those splash plays to get some money. I think that's and that's kind of a common theme among a lot of the guys that I picked, where you just want to have the reps so you can try to get that check.
Yeah, they just don't have it. Even if Oweh played better than anyone expects this year, they need some edge juice. So I think it made sense for them to make that pick with Green. Kyle Van Noy is their best outside linebacker, but he's a more jack of all trades type of guy who cleans up on those sacks. What a freaking career. I'm old enough to remember when people called Kyle Van Noy a draft bust. Like Lions fans hated him back in the day. And
turns out it was the team.
Yeah,
that was the problem.
Like a truly awful Lions team. I'm going to go Kayvon Thibodeaux in part because, look, we know he's going to have less reps with Carter there. It's the number 3 pick in the draft. But 3 guys splitting up the edge reps should be fine. And if Kayvon Thibodeaux, talking about looking for a guy who wants to earn money in the future, and he does have his 5th-year option and everything coming up, maybe that big second contract isn't coming from the Giants necessarily because they have so much invested at the position. It's not too late for him to be the guy I think we expected coming into that draft, where we were just talking about on the last show. I think the consensus was he was a better player than Trayvon Walker, who went 1 overall. And I talked about it with John Shipley. Now I think you would take Walker over him. Yeah. That actually Walker's been better, and Thibodeaux's had moments, but you haven't seen the ascension. If anything, he's flattened out and maybe looked better initially when he wasn't playing quite as many snaps.
Yeah, he's got a lot of tape out at this point, and you're wondering when that step comes. And it's going to be tougher to demonstrate that step if you're trying to display this top 5 pick.
Right. So Abdul Carter was playing some off-ball linebacker at OTAs. You don't like that?
No. I just they didn't draft Abdul Carter to be an off-ball linebacker.
That's fair.
I understand you want to get your best players on the field. Well, then just have them both down there. I just think playing guys out of the position.
But then you have all three.
Yeah.
You have Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, and Kayvon on the field at the same time.
Make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a clear investment in all three of these players. So,
but maybe
controversially play all three.
Yeah. The comp is there to Micah Parsons, of course. And I think the Cowboys ultimately wasted their time with Parsons at off-ball linebacker as a rookie. That they've shown with how they've used him since that they didn't need to do that. Now, if it's off-ball linebacker in a Zach Bond type of role, where at least the way they use Carter, he's ultimately rushing the passer almost all the time, and he's just like a third edge, that's cool. What do you think about the fact that I snuck in another OTA nugget here into this segment? You see how I did that?
Yeah, no, I loved it. It's a master operating.
Because that was going to be in the first part, but I was like, what if I combine my little Abdul Carter off-ball linebacker nugget, which I thought was interesting, with the Thibodeaux thing?
Yeah.
The listeners went out.
And so now, right, people who got everything they wanted in the first bit also get this nugget here in the second bit, and we're not influencing the length of the first bit.
No, we're balancing it perfectly. Give me another guy.
Let's go to one that feels obvious, but I think it's worth noting that when Kelvin Banks was drafted, the idea is, okay, Trevor Penning's got to move inside, or like, who cares about Trevor Penning? But this is a former first-round pick where you've already tried 2 tackle positions. If things do not work out, who's trying to get Trevor Penning at this point?
Nobody.
And so, like, this is almost do or career, like, for Trevor Penning at a position where I don't know how many games Trevor Penning has started in the interior. Probably none. It's a really tough spot to try to go for potentially it's either going to be a first or second year quarterback, presumably, unless the Jameis trade that would matriculate later on, where it's a lot to ask for a guy who hasn't really been able to accomplish much when he was given the opportunity. So now what?
Saints fans are funny. They've convinced themselves that there is a path here with these 2 highly drafted tackles over the last 2 years, not Penning. I'm talking about Braga and Banks. And then Penning moving inside, and you still have McCoy, and Ruiz was a former, like, that they actually have the ceiling of a great offensive line. And if you squint hard and they had the right coaching, it actually could work out quite well. It could also be terrible. There's everything is a maybe. We don't know if Kelvin Banks is going to be good. McCoy's never healthy. You guys have hated Cesar Ruiz half the time. And yeah, Penning's 6'7". He is like a mauler and gets into a lot of fights, though. That's the guard profile.
The most notable thing he's done is get into fights, and people were like, yeah, that means he's trying hard. No, he's fighting people. He's fighting his teammates, and he hasn't been successful. So, like, maybe that mean streak thing is a little overrated.
So it is a trend that the Eagles and the Ravens helped to start last year. People are now trying out these monsters at guard throughout the league. And, Penning 6'7", 325. Used to never see guards like that, but, they did it with Becton. The Eagles have always had pretty big guards, but this is next level. And then the Ravens took it to a whole nother level with Falele. But there's a handful of these guys. I'm blanking, but there's a few other ones around the league that are like this. So just an interesting little trend. I'll go, while we're talking Eagles, let's go to Nakobe Dean. It's going to take a minute for both Nakobe Dean and Jahad Campbell to get fully healthy. It might be a little bit of a race to the field. Nakobe Dean is not on the field as OTAs start, so it's actually Jeremiah Trotter Jr. who's lining up as a starter. But eventually, it's probably going to be Nakobe Dean if he can get back on the field. But Jahad Campbell, to me, was a direct threat to Nakobe Dean, who was playing the best ball of his career before he had that injury last year, which, is really disappointing for such a intriguing guy. And so this is a big year in terms of the rest of his NFL career, because it might not be with the Eagles.
Yeah, most of his career thus far has been dealing with injuries. Yeah. Not just this one, but the one that he had early on coming in that he had to get over to finally get that time on the field. And maybe it makes it a little bit easier that Jahad Campbell's going to be coming back from something. But, like, if Campbell's successful, like, how much is Dean getting on the field at that point? I know they like to rotate and a lot of guys play in Vic's scheme, but it's just
Yeah.
You wonder.
You just got to beat him there. He's got to get there first and play well, potentially. He's coming off a knee injury. He was a surprise participant. Like, he had his helmet on. He's not doing everything, but he's maybe a little ahead of where you would have thought, and definitely ahead of where Campbell is coming off of a shoulder injury. But, yeah, I thought he was playing really well. So, I actually think this is a case where they would lean toward Dean if he's playing well and really try to develop Campbell slowly at a position that's difficult for rookies. All right, you go.
I'm going to do a double dipper for a couple of veterans. One who is loved by his head coach. That's Khalif Raymond and Tim Patrick.
Nice.
Because when I think about both, our second time referencing our GM rankings, Brad Holmes and the Detroit Lions, they make moves. People question them. It turns out Jahmyr Gibbs is good. People have questioned the price for Isaac Tisla. I'm a Tisla believer at this point.
Wow.
If Brad Holmes is in, then I'm in on Isaac Tisla, and I think that kind of decreases the opportunities for Leaf and for Tim Patrick. And he's going to get on the field and make some plays, and there's going to be some Lions receivers because there's a lot of talent to spread the ball around to, and somebody's going to be short on a team that I think is still going to be good without Ben Johnson.
No question. I think they're going to be great. You know who else was a big Tisla fan? Had him ranked very high in his
Who's that?
top 150, which came out right before the draft. Daniel Jeremiah. People were like, "What? Who is this that you have ranked high?" And then he gets taken just about that high in the draft. Jeremiah, though, was not a fan. Speaking of the GM rankings, of your Fontenot pick at number 9. He called me. I was eating breakfast. It was 7:30. I was midway through my first cup of coffee, and he called me on the phone to voice his complaints of the Terry Fontenot at 9 pick.
And that's understandable. I'm not in this to better my relationships with folks. Love DJ. But it was that was what the numbers spat out.
Okay.
And I'm standing by it.
How about Tyrone Tracy with the Giants? I've seen in fantasy Schottenheimer, I think, is going ahead of him. You guys are crazy. Tyrone Tracy put up like 1,100, 1,200 yards. I like Schottenheimer. Schottenheimer, not Schottenheimer. I liked him. There was some talk that he wasn't necessarily beloved around his teammates at Arizona State, kind of a me. So that's a little bit of a concern. But I loved his tape. I thought he went too late in the draft, and yet, I would give I would rather draft Tyrone Tracy if I was in fantasy, even at equal price, because he's shown he could do it. But he's definitely under threat. He needs to ward off this challenge. I think he can.
Yeah, for fantasy purposes, I don't know how many pieces of the 2025 New York Giants that I'm interested in, period. Like, we're talking RB, this is on.
They all matter, though, don't they? You got to rank them.
Yeah, you do have to rank.
I will check what they're ranked.
There are some backups that I'll probably take before.
Dang, bro.
Before the Giants start, just because you want pieces of certain offenses, like you want guys that we think highly of. Points are good.
Malik Neighbors, you certainly would want.
Yeah, of course.
There's a Giant.
There's a Giant. That's the Giant.
In like really deep leagues, I would take Theo Johnson, maybe kind of like Theo Johnson. All right, give me another.
Okay, let's go down to the Kansas City Chiefs. Jawan Taylor has seen Josh Simmons be drafted. Really the biggest draft investment that they've made at the position in some time. A very talented tackle. And Jawan Taylor, actually, when I initially put this, he was up higher on my list of guys in danger based on vibes continuing from 2023, where he led the league in holding as well as false start penalties. He was 13th in false start penalties last year. Jawan Taylor was actually pretty good for the team that went back to the Super Bowl, that's been kind of like bargain shopping at tackle during the Patrick Mahomes era for some reason, frustratingly so. But I think that Josh Simmons creates a situation where Jawan Taylor will be elsewhere eventually.
Great call. Gives me a chance to throw in another OTA nugget. Yeah. Andy Reid said that Josh Simmons was further along than they expected and might even be on the field doing teamwork before the end of minicamp season, which is definitely ahead of where we would have expected, which makes the team sound very optimistic that he'll be out there when training camp starts, which was no guarantee. And we'll see. Recoveries aren't always linear, but he's coming off a patella tendon just as a reminder, a lot of people thought he was a top 10 type of talent, ends up going 32. They also signed Jalen Moore to a 2-year, $15 million contract, per year. And I think you nailed it here. Taylor is their second highest paid player in terms of cap number this year.
Yeah. Danger zone.
And they can cut him and save $20 million next year, 25, something crazy. He's not that good. He's not even. I don't even know if he's good. He's solid. He's okay.
Yeah, I mean, they went to the Super Bowl and they won another one.
Well, that's fair.
Andy Reid also said that Isaiah Pacheco looks tremendous, by the way.
I like that. I like that. We're throwing in nugs. I got to throw in Rhamondre. He was kind of who had me thinking about this segment. Certainly Travion Henderson is a guy, new coaching staff, high pick. They're going to want to use him. I think they're going to want to use the running back in the passing game a lot. Josh McDaniels has done that in the past, been great at it. You know who's also great in the passing game?
Who's that?
Rhamondre freaking Stevenson.
Yes, people sleep on that.
He's outstanding. He's a complete back. I didn't hate that contract when they gave it to him. He didn't have his best year last year, certainly. Running backs, he has been a little bit in the Josh Jacobs mold of he's either incredible or a little disappointing, which you don't love out of your running back. You would like a little more consistency out of a guy that's making that much money. And Josh Jacobs has been that guy too, at least until lately. He's stacked a few good years together. But if nothing else, this would be the year where he's back to being outstanding. But Travion's coming for his neck.
How would you feel about an exchange? Because I do know that the last time Ben Johnson and DeAndre Swift were together, he wound up no longer being on the Detroit Lions. Rhamondre to the Bears in exchange for something that makes you happy.
I really like Rhamondre, but I would think it'd be something interesting to get back to make it worth it. Who would that even be?
Because like
Cole Kmet. I have Cole Kmet written on this list, so we might as well just
let's go to Cole.
Combine it. Cole Kmet's kind of overrated, I think.
Wow,
a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if they loved him that much, then the pick would have been different at 10.
Good player, seems like a great team guy, consistent. I feel like he's in the middle of a lot of mistakes, a lot of mental mistakes that people put on the quarterbacks and stuff. But I feel like he hasn't been a consistent player for them. So yeah, give me a Rhamondre. We get Cole Kmet in as like a second tight end with Hunter Henry.
Straight up, Cole Kmet for Rhamondre?
Yeah, it's fine.
That feels like you guys are taking an L.
We're taking an L? Yeah, but positional value? I don't know. No, I actually am not being truthful. I would not be happy with that. It seems like good value, but I just like Rhamondre. So I hope he holds him off. But they have Antonio Gibson. Ramondre's still a little banged up, not practicing fully, but Travion Henderson is out there.
I will go down to Dallas, where Trayvon Diggs has time left on his deal, but they took Siobhan Revell, and he's still making his way back. I know he's had some time since that knee injury, but there could be a scenario where the Cowboys get out of that deal. Now, that is something that they have not done in the past, but Trayvon Diggs could be facing a threat from Siobhan Revell.
Well, what about a little Trayvon Diggs, Jalen Ramsey trade?
1 for 1.
Could you trade Trayvon Diggs with his injury right now?
I don't think no, because he wouldn't be able to pass the physical at this moment.
Would they ever do a Deron Bland Jalen Ramsey trade? Now I'm just like thinking out loud. No, it doesn't. No. To me, it doesn't make sense to trade Deron Bland, even though he's coming up for a new contract. Yeah, Trayvon Diggs is a guy. I don't know what his future is going to be. It's just so murky with the health, but was such a fantastic player that it seems people are kind of writing his epitaph with the Cowboys in general a little too quickly. Let's see. He's a young guy. I'll wrap up. Let's throw out with just one more. Romeo Doubs leads the 2022 wide receiver draft class in touchdowns. I know touchdowns aren't everything, but he's in a tough spot. It's hard to see him getting a great long-term deal, but man, receivers don't get the free agency much. And so it's a big year for him to try to fend off all that competition from Matthew Golden, from Savion Williams, from his teammates that were already there, have another solid season and go get paid.
But I think as the route runner, he's the premier choice of that group. Like it feels like the player that deals with the Golden problem the most would be Wicks.
Yes. And maybe Jayden Reed if Jayden Reed wanted to be like a true number one, which apparently he did.
Yeah, I would like, everybody would like to be a true number one.
You are a true number one, Patrick.
No, I'm not.
I think that's where we're going to wrap it up there. I've enjoyed the hell out of this week. We're back into our news mode. We got Claybon in the NFL Network polo. It's all happening.
It's an easy outfit. You just throw on the polo. You can wear shorts.
I've got a little new button down here. We will be back on Monday. It's not going to be overnight Monday. We want to catch up on any of the news that's happened over the weekend, so we're going to be taping early Monday morning with Nick Shook. I am looking forward to that one. We'll get some more rankings next week. Big wide receiver one.
Huge.
Coming up. Look, when Jonnu Smith is potentially going back to Arthur Smith again, football's back.